Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Hey, welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now. I am Greg Matusky. I'm the CEO and founder of Gregory FCA, the public relations agency, and I'm the host of Disruption Is Now, where we talk about how AI is going to change the way humans tell stories and how it's going to have an impact on our lives, our culture, our economy, and our business. I'm really excited about today's guests. I woke up this morning thinking this is going to be a good one because we've landed a great get here and a great guest, Antony Cousins. Antony Cousins, he is the executive director of AI strategy at Cision. Cision is the world's largest provider of communication tools to PR agencies and to corporations. It helps us monitor the media, create narratives, and then act upon those narratives. Andy, I want to welcome you here to The Disruption Is Now. Did I get that right? Did I say everything right? I always want to say Antony because here in Philadelphia, where I'm broadcasting from, Antony is kind of the shorthand for Anthony. But did I get that right?
You sound exactly like my mother when you say it. So yeah, good job. I have this slight rush of like I've just done something wrong when I hear it that way. But no, it's fine. It's all good. And you got the intro just right. Thank you for having me.
I guess we first met at the National Icons, the Public Relations Society of America national media called Icons. And I guess you were in the audience. I didn't know that. So you were following me, and then we've become great LinkedIn friends. And I think our worldview on the changes that we're about to see because of AI and how it impacts what we do for a living, I think it aligns pretty well. I mean, I remember you emailed me once and said, would it be all right if I'm giving a presentation? Could I ask the group where they fall on the scale of adoption of AI, 1 to Greg Matusky? Because I am very positive and have been a longtime believer. But from your perspective, where does it all fit in? And where does it fit in with Cision? And also, where does it fit in with human communications?
Yeah, well, I think your intro is just right? Which is it's going to impact our politics, our society, our economy, the way we tell stories. And I was like, that's just for starters. So it really is going to change absolutely everything. But to focus it down on public relations, right? There was a report that came out of the British government a couple of months ago, which specifically named of only a couple of industries that public relations is one of the industries most at risk of being disrupted by artificial intelligence. And I think that's for an obvious reason, right? That so much of what we deal with in public relations is about language. It's about how we talk to each other, it's how we tell stories. And language is specifically the cutting edge of AI right now. The large language models, that is the area of AI that is pushing the boundaries the most. So it's not a surprise that it's our industry that's being targeted the most for that. But I think, and we've covered this, in kind of conversations on LinkedIn a lot, we're seeing a lot of people using it specifically for creating content, which is almost the very first thing people go to when they're using and I'm going to use ChatGPT kind of ubiquitously for the large language models because it is the one that most people have tried first, although it's not the only one out there. But it's the first thing you almost use it for, like, I've got a press release. I'm trying to write a social media post, right? And so content creation, table stakes now. Yes, we should be using it for giving us that first 80%, right? The near draft. But that is only the start, I think, of where AI is going to impact our industry over the course of this year, let alone the next 2 or 3.
I agree. I mean, we're seeing it most effective is in once you master the content generation side, which is a top process, right? I really believe that you can teach somebody how to structure a prompt and get the content you need. And whether we'll be even using prompts a year from now, I don't know. But the other side of it that I see is very powerful is the brainstorming side and then the workflow side. And we've really tried to work here at Gregory FCA to understand that workflow because much of what we do in PR is just fraught with friction and how we relate to our clients, how we find stakeholders, how we interface with the media. So we've really been on this track of using it as a content generation tool, but also how do we look at those things that have always just been an accepted part of the process? For instance, it's just accepted that you're going to miss deadlines with the media because the client can't get back to you fast enough, that it's the last thing on their priority list. But how do you use generative AI to make sure you don't miss that? Because there's no value in the relationship if you miss the deadline. So we've created tailored GPTs that they're preloaded with topics and quotes that we can send to the client when an opportunity arises, and it eliminates them having to start from scratch. They can add to it, edit, and we find that the response time has been shortened, which, as you know, in the media, it is real deadlines. Probably the only place in the world where there are real deadlines. If the Wall Street Journal doesn't have its paper full by 3:00 in the morning, they got a problem. So what are you seeing in workflow, and what are you most excited about?
Yeah, that's a great use case, and I think it's definitely worth calling out that the entire software industry in this space, for as far back as the software has been in this space, like 20 odd years, right, has focused on some very traditional, specific use cases. Right, we gather dimensions and we allow you to look at dimensions. We provide center analysis of dimensions. We allow you to cut and slice and report on dimensions. That kind of been, for the most of the industry, that's kind of what we do. But if you look at what PR people do on a daily basis, that isn't all of what they do, right? That's actually a small part of what they do. To your point, strategizing, brainstorming, whether that's positive kind of thinking about campaigns they can create, or whether it's preparing for a crisis and kind of crisis scenario planning, which none of us, I think, spend as much time on as we should. And we just, sometimes get caught by surprise and have to think quickly. We now have the ability through generative AI to start catering for those kind of use cases that has no software for right now. So I think that's the really exciting potential, is that we can start to now target the other 80% of the population practitioner's day, right? So absolutely. But the challenge, to your point, is workflow. So that is the thing that has been missing. With the chat GPT or a custom GPT, it can be pretty good at like a specific task or a specific problem that you're trying to solve. But often, as you say, in PR, we have a workflow, right? We start with a business level outcome. We have to figure out from that what our communication level outcomes are, what our communication level campaign activities are. And then from that, in my own mind, this is my own workflow. I'm thinking, okay, if that's my objective, what are my stakeholders? Who are my audience? And if that's my audience, what kind of content do I need to convince them of the thing I need them to do or to think? And if that is what I'm trying to get to them, what are the channels I need to use to get it to them? And if I know that, what are the measurement and insights I have from those channels? Or I have a workflow, and you can see that AI has the potential to automate huge chunks of those individual processes. The challenge, and this is the challenge that we're working on, this is the challenge no doubt other people like yourselves in the industry are trying to figure out, is how do you apply AI, which is really good at kind of solving specific problems? How do you join them all together in such a way that you get that joined up seamless workflow that a PR person can kind of rely on and then effectively sit above, rather than drafting those individual bits? It becomes more like the human is setting the objective and the AI is automating that workflow. And that's when we're going to get the real transformational level benefits. And I think that is this year we're going to see that. I saw your LinkedIn post predicting it will be this year. I agree with you. It will be this year. We're working on it. Others are working on it. We'll get there. But that's the really exciting stuff.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. Like right now, you can build a chat GPT, a tailored GPT, and it does do what you want it to do, but just managing those is a problem. There's nowhere to manage them and to archive them and quickly retrieve them. We just started with Teams from ChatGPT, and it's not what I'd hoped it would be. It's still very hard. They had promised collaboration. It's not really collaborative. It's no more than sending your link to one another, like owning your ChatGPT subscription. So they've got a long way to go there, and it was promised, and I think not delivered on. But there's also it's funny. Right before this, I was working with some tailored GPTs, and because it's not software, you can't really expect it to give you the outcome you had hoped every time. This morning, I was doing just what you said. Just before this, you said, where you set up, the audience, right, the channel, maybe their point of pain, the message, and how it's going to be measured. And I had a beautiful tailored GPT that was doing it well. I hadn't used it in 2 weeks. I go back to it today, and all of a sudden it's a regurgitation of how you would do this instead of actually doing it. So I had to prompt it again, and I had to ask it, plead with it to please fill it in for me. But if you realize that it's not ever going to be perfect, because that's not the model, that's not how it works, right? And if you just are willing to continue to go back after it, I often analogize it to having an assistant for different things. And you tell the assistant something and they come back and it's not what you expected. And you realize, I didn't really explain it, right? I didn't explain it well enough. I didn't tell you exactly what I wanted the deliverable to be. So then you go back, you tell it what the deliverable to be. And as a side note, I think I've become a better communicator, especially with some of the text to imaging, because you have to tell it everything. So now when I work with somebody in the real world, I tend to over communicate and to go back and to appreciate the iterative process more than I did before, where, I was always the big idea guy and I couldn't understand why no one understood, what I was trying to communicate. But,
you made the point. You made the point earlier that we still going to be doing prompt engineering a year from now, and I think prompt engineering itself is like a misnomer. Like, all it is setting clear direction, right? Here's the context of the situation. Here's what good looks like from an outcome perspective. Here's some guidelines. Here's some suggestions, but go and figure out the rest. Like, if you're good at setting direction, you're good at using AI as it is right now. But also, yes, as they get smarter, I think you have to worry less about writing really good prompts. It can sort of figure out what you're trying to achieve. But the variability of the output from the models is precisely the reason we've not seen more kind of large scale integrations of generative AI into the bigger software, like, where's Salesforce with this, where's LinkedIn with this. Like, we're starting to see really simple use cases here and there, because ultimately what we're all trying to do is figure out, how do you turn a probabilistic output from a large language model into a deterministic output you can build software around, right? That's the challenge. And it is, for me, a fundamental flipping on its head of how we build software everywhere in the world. Like, every piece of software we use on a daily basis is built on the assumption that you, the human, are doing most of the work, with a little bit of AI here to support you. Whereas actually we have the technical capability now to build software on the assumption that the AI is doing most of the work, and you, the human, just need to set the direction, and then your interface is approving, guiding, reassuring. Like, it's all these other terms, right? It's more strategic, and it's kind of an editing role or a kind of a proofing role, but it is not a manual labor role anymore. But that means fundamentally different interaction with the software requires a fundamentally different user interface. And that is not a small amount of effort or work from a research perspective, from an investment perspective, from scaling it. Like, it's going to take all of us a long time to figure out how to build software that uses generative AI in that way. And it is not through asking people to type text in a box a lot of the time, right? Which is the hardest thing you can ask a user to do. There is a reason we invented graphical user interfaces. It's because we got tired of having to know what to write into the box, right? So building a user interface on the principle that the AI is doing most of the work, without asking the user to constantly type lots of text in boxes, that is the new challenge.
Yeah. And, in the same token, that's what's made it so weird, is it was not built with a specific purpose. It was built for general purpose. So when you're in there and you're building on it, there's so many different directions you can go, and to discover something new that you never thought you could use it to do. I was having an interview with a recent college graduate from University of Central Florida, and she told me how the faculty there has clamped down. You're not supposed to use it. It's cheating. And I want to segue into that with you about education. And so I asked her, right, she worked full time as a restaurant manager, right? She was going to school. And I asked her a bit about that. And she goes, well, I was in charge of developing promotions. And I go, oh, how'd you do that? And she said, I we would sit around after work, and 3 or 4 of us would brainstorm ideas. And, oh, how long did that take you? Oh, it took an hour. And did you get paid for that? No, that was just what we like to do, is create the promotions. And so I said, watch this. And I typed in, I'm a college graduate, a college student. I manage a restaurant. It's springtime. I need to come up with restaurant promotion from the restaurant I work with. Think college break. Think of graduation. Think of the NCAA basketball championships. 10 ideas came up in front of her eyes. And, no one built that to be able to come up with solutions for a Florida restaurant to attract college students. And that's what just invigorates me, is where could you take this and how could you embed it? And it's never going to be the same, but how could you create something, a process that would allow you to become more efficient, more productive, and most importantly to me, Anthony, is to help people become more competent in our profession more quickly. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about. I know that you're often at universities. I have an appearance coming up in 2 weeks at Penn State University here in Pennsylvania to talk a little bit to their business faculty about generative AI. I know you spoke recently at Loyola and somewhere else. I can't remember, another university.
At Boston University, I did this week.
Tell me about that. What are you finding with young people? Because I'm fascinated to hear other perspectives.
Yeah, so you're right. I find it fascinating too, because I need and want to understand how they are thinking about AI, so that whatever I'm thinking for product strategy is kind of meshing with people who are going to be using it the most. As you get more senior, you tend to use the software less, right? Because you have people and you're in more leadership perspectives. So I want to know those people who are going to be living in it, how they feel about it and what are they thinking. So yeah, absolutely. At both those universities, I asked the question, who is using ChatGPT and who's not? And for the most part, most of the kids put their hands up. But I'm interested in the people who kept their hands down. And I was like, so tell me, why are you not using ChatGPT? And I think it was the Loyola University, where someone gave a really clear answer, which is, I don't want to use AI because I want to protect my creativity. I want to know how to be creative and how to be good at being creative, because I feel like if I rely on the AI, then I'll never be different to anyone else. I'll never know what good output looks like. And that's a great answer. However, I don't think you have a choice anymore, right? I think it's not either or, it's both. And so through that conversation, I was inspired to think about, what are all the ways you can use AI to make your writing better, but without using AI to do the writing? And I found 15 to 20 different ideas, of which 10 maybe came from ChatGPT, right? And I added a bunch more, and I tweaked its prompts. So it was a real collaborative effort between myself and ChatGPT to come up with a list. But there's loads of different ways that I think up until now you wouldn't have been able to use a colleague to help you with some of those things. So, for example, read my article. What are the biases that I might have been injecting into the article that I'm not aware of, right? What are my unconscious bias factors? Give me some feedback on that. And it's obviously going to give you really objective, independent assessment of that, right? Give me an impact assessment for specific audiences for this kind of content, right? And there's 8 different audiences I'm trying to segment down and target, and it will give you in a few seconds a good view on 8 of those different audiences. And that's kind of the kind of task which be pretty laborious to ask a colleague to do all these different things, to check your writing, to proof and edit it. But ChatGPT is sat there at 3:00 in the morning and will do everything you ask it to do, right? It's there, and really should be using it every time. So I said to the kids, like, you have to make best use of it because it can make you better at your writing. But you're absolutely right. And I do have a concern that as we start introducing generative AI earlier in the education system, that we are, let's face it, we are lazy as a species, right? If we've got a tool that can do something for us easier, we will use it 100% of the time. So regardless of the challenging from the faculty of like, oh, you can only use it in circumstances, it's like a calculator, right? It's going to be used by the kids wherever possible. But I do have a concern. What does that do to our levels of creativity by the end of that education cycle? I think there are definitely some benefits to this, right? The flip side of this is, yes, there may be challenges to creativity, but on the flip side, if you think about the way we've been teaching mathematics, right, or math in the US, right, math, the way we've been teaching math, you ask for the workings out, right? You ask people to show how they worked out the answer, to know that they came to the conclusion in the right way, because they could have just lucked out, right, and picked the right number. And we've never been able to do that when it comes to written work, right? You submit the report on a book and you read
it's
the
magic.
report, and
Yeah.
you have to figure out kind of what they were thinking from the words you see. Now, if we're using AI to generate the book report, but we have access to the prompts the student used to get there, we now have access to their thought process. We now have access to give them feedback on how they were thinking in a way that we didn't have before. So I think actually, whilst there might be a challenge to creativity, I think there's also, we've got more insight now into how to create the kind of thought processes and the curiosity and the ways that people could think about creating book reports we never had before. So I think there's definitely benefits as well as risks. But when those kids come out of university, I said to them, make sure on your CV you've got expert in AI, right? Do not put on your resume, right, I'm staying away from AI because I want to protect my creativity. That is not a route to a job right now.
Right. Well, it's interesting because you can think about my theory or not, but I've written all my life. That's how I came up. I was a magazine article writer for business magazines, and I tried to train people so hard throughout my career in PR to write, and I would give very lively and invigorated seminars and feel good leaving.
I've witnessed,
but I couldn't get them over the hump. Right, it didn't really seem to stick, or it didn't really seem to help them become better writers. How do you explain why you? I was just having this conversation with our editorial director. Why you might have a sentence that's one word with a period, and then another one word with a period, right? And it was frustrating to me. And then I just really started to study some of neuroscience, not deeply, but as much as I could. And I really started to believe that there are neural pathways that we develop as writers in our brains. And it takes a long time to develop that. And then there were some brain studies that showed that thinking is isolated from data, from calculations, right? That we have one neural pathway for doing calculations and another one for deep thinking. And this was scientists who hooked the brains up to silicon chips and could read the energy coming. And really good writers, I believe, spend a lot of time first learning that data, the words, the punctuation, the syntax. And then they can go on to master the thinking, which is, where do you want this to land? Who do you want this to affect? What is the narrative, the message? What are you trying to get out there? And then really great writers combine the two, that they can conjure words seemingly out of thin air and still stay within what you originally said. What is the message? Who is the audience? What is the channel? Somehow that connects in some people's brains. And I really believe it is by training the brain to do that. And with my junior associates here, we've had a lot of success. If I tell them, don't worry about the data, really think about where you want to go. Tell the machine where you want to go, right? And it's no different than an architect using a calculator or an astrophysicist using a quantum computer. I mean, these are tools. And we've had a lot of success in that. And we've been able to create a productivity, which is mind-boggling. I mean, one young associate here, I stopped in the hall. I said, give me some idea. And she told me about a project that would have taken her 3 hours, which she was probably fudging, not wanting me to know that it would take her more, and how it took her 30 minutes. And the amount of self-esteem that this young woman showed. And that's another thing, because this is a high-stress occupation. And we're always wondering, are we good enough? Can we really do this? But we get our satisfaction a lot of times from a client who says, this is good. I mean, we live for that moment. And if I can help young people get to that moment more quickly, they have better self-esteem. They want to do more and they get excited about it, as opposed to, oh, you used the wrong verb here, or that should have been a semicolon, or it's not a good lead. Like, let's not worry about that. Let's put it aside. Mm-hmm. And let's really figure out where we want to go on the content side. And then on the broader level, as the head of an agency, I've picked this up as my mantra. I mean, this is what I live for now, is to try to imbue the skills in people so they can do better. And on On the other side is the real business value, which comes from that workflow. And that's the next horizon, like you said. So I think we're amazingly aligned on what
Yeah.
we see. And I'm going to ask you one last question. Now, I'm going before a faculty of business professors. What should I tell them? I have no idea whether they're going to be antagonistic, oppositional, supportive. How would you begin this conversation?
So I have there's an out there point I think maybe is worth making, which I only had this realization recently, and I was walking down the halls, right, and I was listening to a senior salesperson explain to a junior salesperson, here's how you write an email to get a demo booked, right? This is a typical sales thing. Like companies all around the world do this kind of activity. And I had that realization, like we as a species already know how to write emails to get demos booked and to get them opened, right? There's enough knowledge out there codified to know how to do that. And yet we are spending our human lives learning and relearning that same lesson generation after generation after generation. That feels to me like a massive waste of human potential, right? All of these people in all of these careers in this kind of knowledge work area, spending our entire careers trying to get really good at something. And maybe some of us, right, get to the point where we make a real difference to the way that is done, right? A small percentage of us are going to get so good at it, we redefine it and we add to the lexicon of knowledge. But frankly, if we're honest, most of us aren't going to get to that level, right? We're going to be mediocre at all those things we do compared to the pantheon of all the other people that have come before us. What a waste of human potential and effort and time when all of that knowledge has already been codified, it's already been learned by the models. Now, let's just use that, right? Well, I think we have to redefine what knowledge is. And knowledge and success, I don't think anymore it is about us sitting down and learning all those things people before us have learned, right? I just don't think that's what we should spend our humans. That's an out there point. It's maybe kind of tangential, but I have that kind of thing. Like it's just a waste of time. And to your earlier point around focusing our attention on the objective and what we're trying to get out of it, I absolutely agree that the humans going forward need to spend a lot more of their time thinking, what is it we're actually trying to achieve, right? And so quickly, as you know, in your space, right, the brief comes in, you've got an opportunity, you've got to get something created. How much time do you spend thinking about what it is the client really needs, and how much you just react and get it done like you've done it before, right? You're in that difficult situation. So I think was it Einstein? We're going to fudge this quote now. That if he had an hour to save the world, he'd spend 59 minutes thinking about the solution, 1 minute implementing it, right? If we could spend more time being really, really clear on what is it we're actually trying to achieve, the rest of it is going to go so much smoother, and AI can do the rest of it. So I would love for humans really to move earlier in that process, be spending time on like, what is it we actually want? What does success look like? Who's impacted by this? Now, how do we think about success for those people as well? And less about where the comma goes, right? Where the apostrophe goes.
Right.
So I think you're absolutely right. And so when it comes to dealing with the faculty, I'd say, let's focus humans on what humans should be doing, right? And humans should be thinking about what it is we're actually trying to achieve. And they should be applying empathy and emotional understanding and context to the models, which is something the models do not have access to, right? The models do not know what the client is trying to achieve with their strategy next year. They don't have access to that. They don't have access to what is truly an ethical or a morally right course of action in any given situation. They can give you good business sense. They can suggest something which is probably legal. They can suggest something that might make commercial sense, but is it ethically right? And is it morally right? That is something humans should be focusing on. So anyway, I would go in there all guns blazing, but I'd love to know how that goes with you.
Well, it was a great conversation, Anthony. I want to thank you for being with us. It was enlightening. We align on a lot of things. I really admire the work you're doing because I think it's very important for platforms like Cision to be ahead of this. This is the grand transition, right? This is transformational. And if you're not thinking about this, you're really not serving your market, because that's what we want to know. We want to learn from others. That's the great thing about AI. There is no textbook, right? We learn from one another. We share information. I often say everything I've learned from AI, I've learned from Twitter or X, right? I see somebody say something, I vet it, I pierce it, I ask them for more, and they're more than willing to share. And where it's going, I think, is going to be an amazing new world where we have super creators who can outperform anything that I've ever done in my life. And I look forward to that. I look forward to advancing it and for them to go on and be in that 10% you were talking about of real impact, real creativity, real advancement. That's what I've dedicated my career. I'm 62 and it's only come to me in the last 3 years, but this is it. This is as important as the internet, as important as the GUI interface, as important as social media, as important as the mobile phone. So I want to thank you for what you're doing for the community. It means a lot. We appreciate it.
And thank you. And I hope I have as much energy as you when I'm 52, let alone 62. So yeah, good.
Energy's not the problem. Energy's not the problem. But again, thanks for coming along with us from London, and good luck. And I'll keep following you closely.
Thank you for having me.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.